Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome back into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. If you're not subscribed, do that right now really quickly. Hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like. Turn on all of your notifications so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. I'm going to be here each week to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news. We have a lot to get to today as the Crimson Tide are expected to have a massive recruiting weekend as they welcome the LSU Tigers to Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday night. Of course, last week on last episode of The Process, we discussed the Crimson Tide's big recruiting weekend when they hosted the Tennessee Volunteers. This weekend is expected to be even bigger than that weekend, and we are going to give an early preview of some of the guys expected to be in Tuscaloosa throughout the weekend. I'm also going to give you guys some quick updates as I was able to hit the road last week to check out a couple of games on Thursday and Friday night, and we are going to start those recruiting updates by discussing the Crimson Tide's four-star tight end commit Jaleel Skinner out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. I had an opportunity to see him in action when IMG Academy took on the Auburn Tigers, Auburn High School, of course, in Auburn, Alabama on Friday night. Jaleel Skinner told me that he was really happy to be committed to the Crimson Tide. He said he committed to Alabama because he felt the Crimson Tide were going to put him in the best position to succeed in the future. He talked about the Crimson Tide's offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, play calling, specifically his play calling, incorporating the tight ends more into the Crimson Tide's offense. You guys can check out my full interview with Jaleel Skinner over at touchdowналabama.com. Skinner also added that he feels everyone in Alabama is chasing greatness and he wants to be one of the best tight ends to ever do it. And that's another reason why he committed to the Crimson Tide. So be sure to pick up your subscription at touchdowналabama.com so you can read up on the latest on Jaleel Skinner. I also had an opportunity to catch up with his current teammate and future teammate Tyler Booker, who is also verbally committed to the Crimson Tide. Booker, of course, is a four-star offensive lineman in the 2022 recruiting class. He's actually putting on a recruiting hat for the Crimson Tide in the 2022 recruiting class. He told me that he was recruiting fellow Florida products and American heritage kids in Earl Little Jr, a four-star defensive back who we have talked about a lot on the process, and his teammate Marvin Jones, a four-star defensive end in the 2022 recruiting class. Tyler Booker said those are the top two guys he is recruiting for the Crimson Tide in the 2022 recruiting class. He also talked about the dream of him playing for the Crimson Tide in the future. You guys can check out that article as well as always over at touchdowналabama.com. The Crimson Tide recently hosted a 2022 defensive lineman, a rising 2022 defensive lineman in Isaiah Hastings. They hosted him when they took on the Tennessee Volunteers for an official visit. I finally had an opportunity to catch up with Hastings, and he told me that he got a family feel from his official visit to the University of Alabama. He said it felt like a family throughout the weekend. Of course, he is a product of Canada, but he's playing his senior season at Clearwater Academy International in Florida. The Crimson Tide really seemed to be really interested in Hastings. They look to be in a great position after they put together a great official visit for the Canada product a couple of weeks ago. The Crimson Tide also hosted five-star offensive lineman Keonta Goodwin on that weekend when they hosted Isaiah Hastings for an official visit. Goodwin had an opportunity to take an official visit to Alabama as well, along with his guardian, his legal guardian at the moment, and his mentor and trainer, and Chris Vaughn. I had an opportunity to catch up with Vaughn, and he told me that Goodwin's biggest takeaway from his official visit to Alabama was actually the Crimson Tide's individual player development. He said that really stood out to Goodwin. He also talked about what Goodwin brings to the table. In Vaughn's own words, he said he feels that Goodwin is actually the best high school prospect in the country. He told me that if you had to draft any high school player in the world, it would be Keonta Goodwin. You guys can learn a lot more about Keonta Goodwin's journey to become one of the top offensive tackles in the 2022 recruiting class at 6'8" and weighing over 300 pounds. You guys can check out that article as well over at touchdownalabama.com. I also had an opportunity to catch up with some 2023 recruits over the last week or so. One of those guys is Samuel and Pibble. He is teammates with the Crimson Tide 2022 commits Tyler Booker and Jaleel Skinner. Samuel and Pibble is actually a kid who is looking at making a decision pretty soon. He is rated as a 5-star recruit, 5-star athlete on multiple recruiting sites. Currently plays tight end for IMG Academy. Crimson Tide wants him to be in more of an outside linebacker defensive end role at the next level, but he wants to make a decision in the next month or so. He actually wants to take a visit to Alabama before he makes that decision. He wanted to visit Alabama last week, but he was unable to do so, but he does want to get to Tuscaloosa before he makes a decision pretty soon. He talked about his relationship with the Crimson Tide's defensive back coach Jay Villa, and the Crimson Tide's defensive line coach Freddie Roach with me after that particular game when IMG Academy took on the Auburn Tigers. You guys can learn more about Samuel and Pibble over at touchdownalabama.com as well. Jaleel Hurley is the other 2023 prospect I want to talk about today. Had an opportunity to see Hurley and Florence High School take on Gardendale last week on Thursday night. And Hurley looked really impressive at 6'3", approximately 180 pounds. He looked really fluid in pass coverage, rarely out of position in zone coverage. And he showed that he was a willing tackler. So I was really impressed with the way that he played on Thursday night. I had an opportunity to catch up with him after the game, and he told me that he had a strong relationship with the Crimson Tide. Talked about his recent visit to Tuscaloosa as he was actually on campus when the Crimson Tide took on the Ole Miss Rebels earlier in the season. He dropped a top 8 over the weekend and included the Crimson Tide in his top 8. Alabama will continue to push for the 5-star defensive back out of Florence High School in Florence, Alabama in the 2023 recruiting class. At the moment, Alabama is in a great position with them. As he said, he has a very strong relationship with the Crimson Tide's coaching staff. At the moment, the Crimson Tide are also building their relationship with a guy Jaleel Hurley in Florence High School went against on Thursday night, and that guy is Kelby Collins, a 4-star defensive end out of Gardendale High School in Gardendale, Alabama. He told me that he is building his relationship specifically with the Crimson Tide's defensive line coach Freddie Roach. Kelby Collins looked really good on Thursday night as well. Was very violent, really aggressive, rushing from multiple positions along the Gardendale defensive front. So he's a guy the Crimson Tide are also going to continue to push for in this 2023 recruiting class as well. He will actually be on the campus of the University of Alabama this weekend, along with a loaded list of 2023 recruits. This is a list that we are going to bring up on our page right now. Of course, John Ivory in the producer studio providing all of our nice graphics, but he's bringing up a graphic right now. You guys can see the list of 2023 recruits Touchdown Alabama has confirmed will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. You have a couple of familiar names when you take a look at Peter Woods and Tony Mitchell, of course, along with Kelby Collins. So when you take a look at the 2023 recruiting class, a lot of recruits across multiple recruiting classes will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend, as the Crimson Tide as always have a big recruiting weekend when the LSU Tigers come into town. So it should be a loaded list of recruits on the sidelines when the Crimson Tide warm up, and in the stands when the Crimson Tide take on the LSU Tigers on Saturday night. But now I am going to switch gears and talk about some of the 2022 recruits who will be on campus for unofficial and official visits this weekend. We are going to start with the guy I am pretty sure a lot of Alabama fans are familiar with, and I am talking about Earl Little Jr., the 4-star defensive back out of American Heritage High School in Plantation, Florida. One of the more versatile defensive back prospects in the 2022 recruiting class. We all know Nick Saban loves to cross-train guys. When you take a look at what Earl Little brings to the table, he's a guy who could play all over the secondary at the next level. He's a knowledgeable defensive back. He's really aggressive, really athletic. His dad, who actually played in the NFL for several years, he compared Earl Little Jr. to Minkah Fitzpatrick. Of course, Fitzpatrick is a former Alabama defensive back. Earl Little plans to take his official visits to Alabama this weekend. Of course, he has unofficially visited the University of Alabama several times in recent months. The Crimson Tide get an opportunity to get him back on campus. He has previously stated that the Crimson Tide are his favorite. I think the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to just solidify their position even more by getting him back on campus this weekend. Little will be joined by Damani Jackson, a 5-star defensive back out of California by the way of Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana. Jackson is currently verbally committed to the USC Trojans. You can tell that his commitment to the Trojans is a very solid commitment because we all know the changes that are projected to come to the program, the instability that is currently surrounding that program, but he's sticking to his verbal commitment to the USC Trojans, and I think that speaks a lot to how solid that commitment is at the moment. But the Crimson Tide will have an opportunity to host him this weekend. He's a very athletic defensive back, can do it all, a really aggressive guy. I'm pretty sure when you take a look at his film, you can easily tell why every school in the nation would love to have Damani Jackson on their roster in the future. So this is just one to pay attention to as the Crimson Tide try to get him on campus, try to show him that he is a great fit at the University of Alabama. But I think he's really solid with USC at the moment, but we will see if the Crimson Tide can make some moves in his recruitment, shake up things with the Trojan commit on this weekend. Those two guys, Little and Jackson, will be joined by Anthony Lucas, another guy we have talked about quite a bit on the process in recent months. Of course, Lucas is a 4-star defensive lineman out of Arizona. Weighs more than 300 pounds, but he plays like a guy who weighs a lot less. A overall really athletic kid. Not too many 300-pound guys. You not see a lot of 300-pound guys who can line up at tight end, who could play basketball the way that Anthony Lucas plays basketball. So he's just a really athletic, big defensive lineman, and all of that athleticism, that elusiveness transfers over to the gridiron end to the football field. Crimson Tide have him on campus for an unofficial visit, as he did officially visit the University of Alabama during the summer. It should be a good opportunity for the Crimson Tide to make some moves to try to add some more defensive linemen to their 2022 recruiting class. I think this is going to be a focus for Alabama's coaching staff moving forward as they try to strengthen their 2022 defensive line class overall. The last guy I want to talk about on today's episode of The Process, and a guy who will be on campus as well, is Shaz Preston, a 4-star wide receiver out of St. James High School in Louisiana. The Crimson Tide hosted him a couple of times for unofficial visits during the summer. Had an opportunity to catch up with his dad, Shaz Preston, after one of those visits. He told me that they were confident in what Alabama's coaching staff and what the entire Alabama program can do for their son. Getting James, a Louisiana kid, on campus this weekend could go over very well for the Tide, as they want to add a couple of more wide receivers to their class as well. They currently have commitments from Kobe Prentice and Aaron Anderson. Anderson is a product of New Orleans, Louisiana. The Crimson Tide are targeting a couple of prospects who could be wide receivers at the next level out of the state of Louisiana moving forward in this 2022 recruiting class, with Shaz Preston being one of their top targets. Preston is a really aggressive, probably the most physical wide receiver in the 2022 recruiting class, possesses a big body, so the Crimson Tide getting him on campus could go a long way for the Crimson Tide, possibly getting a commitment from Preston in the future. Preston currently has the Crimson Tide listed in his loaded top 4. So those are the guys I wanted to talk about today. Give you an early preview of some of the guys who will be on the campus of the University of Alabama this weekend. We do plan to have another show. We will talk about some more guys who will be on campus, and I think that just points to how loaded this weekend is expected to be for the Crimson Tide on the recruiting trail. But thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. If you're not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like, turn on all of your notifications so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com, pick up your subscription. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber only articles. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have that Apple device, to download the Touchdown Alabama app so you can receive breaking news notifications when we drop content on our website and on our YouTube page across our multiple services. So be sure to pick up the Touchdown Alabama app in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.